The Odyssey is written and directed by Christopher Nolan. It is based on Homer's classic poem. Odysseus, king of Ithaca, embarks on a perilous journey to return home after the Trojan War. Crossing the Mediterranean Sea with his fellow soldiers, they soon find themselves battling not only the elements, but an array of deadly obstacles and mythical creatures along the way. The Odyssey was my #1 most anticipated film of 2026. I am a huge fan of Christopher Nolan's work, with some of my favourites of his being Dunkirk, Inception, Tenet, Interstellar, which I recently saw in IMAX. That was an incredible experience. And he's just one of those filmmakers that every film he makes feels like an event leading up to it. So the $1,000,000 question was, what does he do after winning a shit ton of Oscars? Well, being Christopher Nolan, he could do anything he wanted. So he decided to adapt The Odyssey. On top of Nolan being the selling point, this film has an incredible cast. Matt Damon, Tom Holland, Anne Hathaway, Zendaya, Robert Pattinson, John Leguizamo, just to name a few. The marketing for this film has just made it look epic. So yeah, it's fair to say I was pretty damn hyped for The Odyssey. As I just mentioned the cast, let's get into them. We of course all know Matt Damon to be an incredible actor, but I think this is his best performance yet. Nolan asks a lot of Matt Damon here, because being Christopher Nolan, he wasn't just going to use green screens for this. He was going to make everyone making this movie feel the weight of what they were making. And you do particularly feel that in Matt Damon's performance. Everything tests the character of Odysseus. And as the movie goes on, you can just see it in Damon's face. The pain, the exhaustion. But at the end of the day, Odysseus is a leader. And the way Damon portrays Odysseus rallying his crew and getting them through these tough times. Yes, he's absolutely flawed, but you want to see this character try to get home. Now, I'm not going to go through the entire cast list because I'll be here for the rest of the year. So I'll just pick out a few others. Robert Pattinson is great. I did not know he had it in him to make me hate him, but wow, is his character in equal parts sleazy and creepy. Also, Tom Holland surprised me. I think he was really able to hold his own against some of the more experienced actors here. I think he portrayed the evolution of this character, where he's young, but he's really trying to mature very well. Now, one thing Christopher Nolan absolutely does here is he is able to capture the scope. In terms of the feeling of the film, it is epic. There are so many different locations and so many different encounters throughout the whole film. So by the end of it, you feel like you've been on the Odyssey yourself, which I'm sure is what Nolan was trying to do. I'll talk about the action sequences a bit later, but in terms of the technical competency of the action sequences, these might be his best directed action sequences yet. His use of the camera is incredibly immersive, but another thing I love about this movie is that he's able to combine the more mythical and fantastical elements of Greek mythology and really ground them in reality. Nothing here ever feels out of place or too silly, which can be hard to do when you are dealing with some of the more mythical and fantastical elements. As well as that, Christopher Nolan explores some filmmaking chops here that he's not been able to before. No spoilers of course, but there are two horror-like sequences that genuinely had my heart racing. If I'm being totally honest, my main takeaway from The Odyssey is that I want Christopher Nolan to make a full-on horror movie. With this film, I think it really finds its footing in the second and third acts. The third act in particular being magnificent. However, I do have quite a few issues with the first act. In typical Christopher Nolan fashion, you get a lot of information very quickly. A lot of names are just thrown about, and because there are so many characters, the film is trying to set up all of them at the beginning. While I didn't necessarily find it hard to understand per se, I found it really tough to retain all of the information and keep up with everything going on. While I can appreciate Nolan's attempt to not bore us with the exposition and drag it out, ultimately the way the film is set up made me feel very overwhelmed, to say the least. Because again, I just felt like I had information overload. On top of this, the dialogue. While it's not old-fashioned dialogue like you'd hear in a Robert Eggers movie, they're also not necessarily talking in modern slang either. So the style of the dialogue can definitely take some getting used to. In my pros, I mentioned the technical competency of the action sequences, but in terms of their place in the story, I did find in the first act for them to feel a bit weightless. They did kind of just feel like action sequences for the sake of action sequences. I do think once the film gets to a sequence with Samantha Morton, that's when it really starts to pick up steam. Again, that third act is an absolute belter and is in contention for one of Nolan's best third acts as well. At the end of the day, do I wish I enjoyed The Odyssey more than I actually did? I'd be lying if I said no. I'd love to be sitting here and telling you guys that this is my favourite film of the year, but I still enjoyed it and I think it's a pretty good movie. It is something I do think can improve on rewatch, I do want to see this movie again. And the way in which this film is made, where everything is so practical and you can feel that, I find really admirable. I'm going to give the Odyssey a B. Guys, if you've seen the Odyssey, did you love it? Did you hate it? If you haven't seen it, are you looking forward to it? Let me know below. Thank you so much for watching this video. You guys are awesome. Blu-ray Billy, logging off.